Hi everyone, happy Earth Day. I am Duyen Lam, a graduate student at Marquette University, and I'm very happy to be here to share with y'all the topic of my policy brief that I did for Dr. Kell's Policy and Politics course. So let's hop into it. So today we'll be talking about environmental justice and green infrastructure in disadvantaged communities. So just to set the baseline, today we'll be discussing about systematic injustices in infrastructure development, benefits of green infrastructure, GI, negative impacts GI can have on disadvantaged communities, legal barriers, and ways forward for policymakers. So what is environmental justice? Environmental justice, as defined by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, in the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Infrastructure projects has historically overlooked disadvantaged communities, and two major projects identified to have long-lasting impacts on people of color standard of living is the 1956 National Interstate Highway Act and the 1934 Federal Housing Administration's Residential Security Maps. The 1956 National Interstate Highway Act authorized 41,000 miles of interstate highways to be constructed across America. While this project was great for the rest of America, it displaced 1 million people from their homes. These projects drives up the cost of housing and displaces existing communities into more affordable areas that may have worse living conditions. So this here is the housing foreclosure in the 1930s, which is the Great Depression. So you can see in 1932 and 1933, the foreclosure per 1,000 mortgages were super high. And in order to combat that, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, HOLC, categorized neighborhoods based off of desirability to give access to mortgages to kind of slow down the rate of the housing foreclosures. The product that came from the HOLC were the residential security maps. The residential security maps predicted risk based off of age, property upkeep, housing prices, but also the presence of non-white and foreign-born residents. The maps were utilized by institutions to assess mortgage risks that their white clients will be facing if African Americans bought a property in or near a suburb, initiating the practice of redlining. Here is a residential security map of Milwaukee County in 1938. You have your green categorized as the best property. You know, we see a little bit of Shorewood, a little bit of Whitefish Bay, and then also blue is also within those areas. And then down toward downtown, we have definitely declining in yellow and hazardous in red. And this map was, I got it from the archive of UW Milwaukee collection. So this here is also a closer look of the downtown area, primarily red and yellow. The two major implications of the redlining practice is outlined here, where banks' refusal to lend in predominantly Black neighborhoods led to lack of reinvestment opportunities that further declined infrastructure and housing stock in an area that was already super poor. The second was that white borrowers received financial assistance in buying homes, while even higher income Blacks were denied mortgages, supporting white flight into suburban community, both in which further attenuating racism and segregation. The conversation of infrastructure development comes at a no better time than now, with the Biden's infrastructure plan being passed, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act. As the government and the relevant stakeholders are deciding how to spend the allocations, it is important to recognize the inequality in America infrastructure and propose real possible solutions to these distortions. On to green infrastructure. Green infrastructure can come in many different words. It can be known as BMP, Best Management Practice, or LID, Low Impact Development. And also within green infrastructure, there's bioswales, rain garden, downspouts, pervious pavers. The list can go on, but we're going to primarily refer to all these projects as green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is increasingly invested and implemented across urban cities to sustainably approach stormwater management. Milwaukee is among the leaders in implementation of GI, pledging to add 143 acres of green space throughout the city by 2030, according to the City of Milwaukee Green Infrastructure Plan from 2019. The City of Milwaukee Green Infrastructure Plan is a $2.8 million investment in creating a healthier and more resilient city in the face of climate change. And the breakdown of how the money would be used is shown in this pie chart, where most of it will go towards street alleys and parking lots, and the next large chunk is in Milwaukee green schools and play fields, and then ongoing green infrastructure maintenance, and then private parking lot programs. So the difference between green and gray infrastructure. Gray infrastructure, an example of it is the Milwaukee Deep Tunnel, where it's a huge project that is very expensive, has less ecological co-benefit, less social co-benefits, but it efficiently transports water. On the other hand, we have green infrastructure that is less expensive, provides urban habitat, promotes biodiversity, protects water bodies, adds green space amenities, beautifies neighborhood, retains stormwater, infiltrate water through the soil, and it also lessens the load of stormwater to enter into the gray infrastructure. An example of a green infrastructure project is the Alice Garden Rainwater Harvesting Project, where we have the catchment area of the GI to be this playground of the school. The water is then routed into a bioswale, which is a form of GI in the middle, and then the water is then stored in an underground cistern that could be later used by the garden to water the plants. The City of Milwaukee Green Infrastructure Plan identify GI to have a triple bottom line of sustainability. The benefits are environmental, social, and economic. The environmental co-benefits are water quality improvements, energy saving, urban heat island reduction, habitat improvement, air quality improvement. The social co-benefits are potential reduction of crime, recreational and educational opportunities, and community connectedness. The economic co-benefits are the initial cost investments, cost of operations and maintenance, job growth, property value increase, and existing gray infrastructure relief. So we're just going to talk about them in slew because the social and health benefits are very associated with the economic and the environmental benefits. So we're going to start off with social and health benefits. That includes air pollution, urban heat island, and violence. A legacy of redlining is that properties near hazard waste sites were given a grade D and sold to predominantly non-white and foreign-born buyers. The concern with these properties now is that the air quality and the health risks that are associated with such properties. A study at the University of Michigan found hotspots of health risk in communities near hazard waste, heavily trafficked highways, Superfund sites, and Detroit, Grand Rapids, Flint, Saginaw, Lansing, and Kalamazoo. And of course, not a surprise to the researchers, these hotspots were also historically redlined zones. And on to strategies to take on air pollution. Air pollution. So here we have a result from a model in an industrial precinct in Victoria, Australia, where they analyzed the air quality from model scenarios of trees, green roofs, and green walls. So as you can see from the results, new tree growth in an area can drastically improve the air pollutant removal. They found that the new trees could be like 80 trees per hectare. can really drastically improve the air quality. Urban heat island is an environmental issue that affects human health because UHI is correlated with higher rates of obesity, asthma, and cardiovascular disease, and limited access to air conditioning. So I really was super excited to share Urban Heat Island because my love for New York Times articles. So every summer, New York Times has done a really great job highlighting Urban Heat Island and urban inequality. And so I'm going to share with you two articles I really liked from New York Times that really highlighted the issue. So this article is titled How Decades of Racist Housing Policy Left Neighborhoods Sweltering. This article was released on August 24th, 2020. And it took place in Richmond, Virginia. So here in the 1930s, federal officials redlined these neighborhoods in Richmond, Virginia, marking them as risky investments because residents were Black, very much like the Milwaukee residential security maps. Today, these redlined neighborhoods are the hottest parts of town in the summer with few trees and abundance of heat-trapping pavements, while white neighborhoods that were not redlined tend to be much cooler today, a pattern that repeats nationwide. The second article I wanted to share came out in August 20th, 2021, Why an East Harlem Street is 31 degrees hotter than Central Park, and the subtitle just really hits it. If you want to map inequality in New York, you can just count the trees. And so what this article did was that they looked at land surface temperatures, wealth, as well as percent tree canopy. So let's get into it. So here in Central Park, we have a land surface temperature, LST, of 84 degrees Fahrenheit. You go up to East Harlem and it jumps up to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Their second assessment was between Mott Haven and Riverdale. So Mott Haven is one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City, and the tree canopy cover is 7%, whereas Riverdale is a much more affluent community. The tree canopy cover is 47%. So that kind of highlights the inequality in just temperature, which is really crazy. And so the strategies that we're going to look at is from a study done in Sri Lanka where they found that urban heat islands can be offset by implementing green roofs, green walls, and trees and curbside. And in this study, they found a combination of GI can succeed in bringing down the temperatures in Sri Lanka with 100% green roofing or curbside trees, 50% green roofing, 5% green walls, and a combination of each in order from left to right. You can really decrease the temperature by 1.87 degrees Celsius, 1.76 degrees Celsius, 1.79 degrees Celsius, 1.86 degrees Celsius, and 1.90 degrees Celsius. Now we're going to go in and talk about ways in which green infrastructure can combat urban violence. So violence can be combated with green space implementation because the green space encourages community interactions and promotes social cohesion that are associated with behaviors that are for the common good. The second being the space itself gives the benefit of physical space to exercise, which improve physical and mental health, which in turn can reduce violence. The last thing is that the green space can decrease temperature, as we mentioned before, which reduces aggression that comes from the effects of urban heat island. We're going to focus specifically on a case study done in Philadelphia, where they took a blighted property and they remediated it for it to be a green space. The picture on the left is the before, and the picture on the right is the after the remediation. By converting blighted properties that shelters illegal activities into maintained green spaces, urban programs can be cost-effective strategies to sustainably reduce violence. The treatment of blighted properties was effective as the group found to significantly reduce crime overall, gun violence, burglaries, nuisances after the treatment of the vacant lots in the neighborhood. And as we can see from the results, the reduction in firearm was negative 0.46, non-firearm 0.4, overall negative 2.2. And this result was over a course of 45.8 months that they studied the site. So what the authors believe the results was coming from the treatment giving a very visible sign that the lot was maintained and cared for and encouraged entry and use by residents, which increases kind of like ownership of the property. So throughout the whole presentation, there's just like little bits and pieces of economic benefits, but we're going to dive deeper into the specific economic benefits of G. There are a lot of economic benefits that comes from avoiding damage as well as just like simply saving money. So this here is a benefit cost analysis of green infrastructure done in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So green infrastructure is appropriate for all communities because of the menu of options that are available, and the community can choose which type of pollutant or where they really want to work on in their community. So if the community is interested in energy savings, for example, they can decide to do street tree planters or a green roof, and each of these would have its level of associated annual benefits. But if the pollutants that they want to tackle is total suspended solids, then all these options are very comparable. But when you look at, for say, rain garden, which is $1.37, and conserve natural air, which is $1.36, and dollar per meter cube of water quality volume per year, if you are a community with low funds, you would choose to do a rain garden project instead of a full-blown conservation of natural area that may be a little more difficult. So onto like a much larger scale green infrastructure project is a full-on land conservation in the floodplains. So this case study is in East River watershed, which is along nearby the Fox River in Wisconsin. So this case study modeled the avoidance cost of reserving a parcel for land conservation instead of developing it. So the three different scenarios that they use to decide how much parcel should be conserved is through flood depth and parcel acreage, cost and flood depth and parcel acreage. And so they found that just by looking at flood depth or just conserving 69% of the parcels from being developed, they can have an avoided damage cost of $2.2 million. With all the positive benefits of GI, there are negative impacts of GI that can be placed upon disadvantaged communities. A concern of the implementation of GI is the price of having a nice public good, causing housing price to increase, displacing low-income individuals and or having their community gentrified. So here we have the results of Conaway et al. 2008, where they modeled percent increase in housing prices with increase in green space in Vermont Corridor, a region in Los Angeles, California. So here the authors found that 1% increase in amount of green space, which is about 200 to 300 feet around their home, you can expect a 0.07 increase in expected sales price of your home, which is like an additional $171 in the median price. But if the green space is increased to 50%, 15%, which is about the size of a pocket park in the area, you can expect a 1.05% increase in the expected sales price of your home, which is an additional $2,565 in the median price. A little closer to us is the 606 Rails to Trails project in Chicago. So the 606 project is a community-initiated project that converted an abandoned rail line to an aesthetic greenway trail for cyclists and pedestrian. And on this map, the green is the 606 trail, and it also indicates like the neighboring neighborhoods with the difference in median households and income between 2012 through 2006 and 2006 and 2010 through 2010. A negative trade-off of the 606 project is the acceleration of gentrification and influx of people with higher income who can't afford higher housing prices in the area. So the study done by this group found that households bordering the 606 average change in demographic and housing variables between 2010 and 2016 was much greater than the neighborhoods around the 606 and the city of Chicago overall. Some legal barriers associated with GI is that GI potential liabilities are not well understood for storms that exceed its designed, but also there's regulatory hurdles associated with permits and governmental scale is disconnected and or when there's a lack of resources. GI are not designed for large storms and can potentially cause flooding if the storm event surpasses the design criteria. If damages occur because of GI, it is possible that the municipality is not always responsible for the damages. So here I have two court cases. I have the Smith versus Cincinnati Stormwater Management Division and Physicians Plus versus Midwest Mutuals. In the first case, water flow damages was caused by the municipality's negligence. And in this case, the court ruled that the municipality was not liable because there was an absence in malicious behavior or bad faith, regardless of the municipality's failure to adopt recommendations for the system. In the second case, a car accident occurred by a stop sign that was covered by a tree branch. And in this case, the DOT and municipality was liable for the damages that occurred. So this highlights that in marginalized communities where there is already an underlying distrust for the government, members of this community will require policies that will protect them from municipality infrastructure failure. The second legal barrier that disadvantaged communities may face are the regulatory hurdles such as permits and reports to maintain the permits. These hurdles are difficult to manage at a local scale, especially in disadvantaged communities with minimal resources. Because of lack of resources and readiness to maintain the GI, members of the community may have to outsource the workforce. This may not be the preferred approach as there is a negative connotation that new technology takes away jobs. And at the city scale, the implementation of GI requires efforts from the local, state, and federal government that is traditionally disconnected, and in marginalized communities, they really require collaboration from across all scales in order to have the autonomy to decide in their own community where to target the problem and where to maximize the benefits. So ways forward for policymakers. Marginalized communities have historically been overlooked by policymakers and often excluded from the environmental decision-making processes. Members in this group may not be engaged in the GI projects due to the perceptions about the distribution of costs and benefits, the distrust of local government, prioritization of other house needs, and presence of residents in the affected neighborhoods. So in order for environmental justice to really be felt, there needs to be a system in place to support disadvantaged communities. Based off of the negative impacts of GI and the legal barriers outlined in this talk, I came up with 3 policy recommendations to share with you all. The first one is to establish state-level emergency funds for community members in cases where GI fails. The second one is to integrate housing price protection policies. And the last one is to facilitate training opportunities for community leaders in permitting maintenance of GI. So the first one's important because new technology with uncertainty of performance outside of its design parameter is a liability. Without a legal binding agreement as to how the distribution of costs will pan out under the circumstances that the GI fails, community members will most likely not agree to the implementation. The second one is important because many GI implemented throughout the country are from grassroots nonprofit organizations that generally does not have the resources or sovereignty to protect housing prices from increasing. And here in Milwaukee, we know that affordable housing at large is a complex issue beyond GI. This complex issue highlights the need for all governmental scales and stakeholders to cooperate. The last policy recommendation is important because to overcome permitting and maintenance hurdle GI, there must be groups dedicated to facilitating training opportunities for community leaders. Education and sharing knowledge and resources is an important element in making sure everyone has an equal opportunity to pursue GI projects. And I really believe that once these policy recommendations are addressed, we really take away some of the limitations from disadvantaged communities in pursuing GI projects. And when these limitations are put down, these communities can really make logical decisions on what is best for their own community and really thrive in it. And with that, that is all of my presentation. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Jenny Keel from UW-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Science and inviting me to be here, as well as my research group under Dr. Anthony Parolari at Marquette University and special graduate students and friends Gregory Dieter and Donald Ryan from Marquette University for being here and assisting me with this presentation during Easter break. Thank you. I will now be taking questions, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.